The Nowata Methodist Church is happy to produce a lot of different content for the edification of Christ's church throughout the world. This daily segment that you're listening to right now corresponds with the Daily Bible Reading Challenge, which is hosted by Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. If you want to download the list of readings that they publish for yourself or learn more about this challenge, this initiative, go to biblereading.christkirk.com. I'm Jeffrey Rickman. I'm the pastor here in Nowata, and I read from the Berean Standard Bible, which you can also find at berean.bible. Consider subscribing to this podcast to be a part of this daily effort to grow in familiarity with and love of God's holy word. Let's dive in for today. Hey, I'm glad you joined me. I'm Jeffrey. I like reading the Bible. I like when other people join me to read the Bible. If this is your first time with me, welcome. We actually began with Esther yesterday. We did the first 7 chapters, so you might consider going back so you know the build-up here if you don't already. So it's just fine. If this is where you start, we're just going to do the last few chapters and then go through 3 Psalms. So God bless you. I hope this is a blessing to you. Here we go. Esther chapter 8. That same day, King Xerxes awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed his relation to her. The king removed the signet ring he had recovered from Haman and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed Mordecai over the estate of Haman. And once again Esther addressed the king. She fell at his feet weeping and begged him to revoke the evil scheme of Haman the Agagite which he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter toward Esther, and she arose and stood before the king. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if I have found favor in his sight, and the matter seems proper to the king, and I am pleasing in his sight, may an order be written to revoke the letters that the scheming Haman son of Hammedatha the Agagite wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how could I bear to see the disaster that would befall my people? How could I bear to see the destruction of my kindred?" So King Xerxes said to Esther the queen and Mordecai the Jew, "Behold, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he was hanged on the gallows because he attacked the Jews. Now you may write in the king's name as you please regarding the Jews, and seal it with the royal signet ring. For a decree that is written in the name of the king and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked." At once the royal scribes were summoned, and on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan, they recorded all of Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and princes of the 127 provinces from India to Cush, writing to each province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes and sealed it with the royal signet ring. He sent the documents by mounted couriers riding on swift horses bred from the royal mares. By these letters the king permitted the Jews in each and every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province hostile to them, including women and children, and to plunder their possessions. The single day appointed throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued in every province and published to all the people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers rode out in haste on their royal horses, pressed on by the command of the king. And the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal garments of blue and white, with a large gold crown and a purple robe of fine linen, and the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. For the Jews it was a time of light and gladness, of joy and honor. In every province and every city, wherever the king's edict and decree reached, there was joy and gladness among the Jews with feasting and celebrating. And many of the people of the land themselves became Jews, because the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Esther chapter 9. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the king's command and edict were to be executed. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but their plan was overturned, and the Jews overpowered those who hated them. In each of the provinces of King Xerxes, the Jews assembled in their cities to attack those who sought to harm them. No man could withstand them, because the fear of them had fallen upon all peoples. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them. For Mordecai exercised great power in the palace, and his fame spread throughout the provinces as he became more and more powerful. The Jews put all their enemies to the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did as they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, including Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Eridatha, Parmashta, Erisai, Eridai, and Vaizatha. They killed these 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On that day, the number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king, who said to Queen Esther, "In the citadel of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the royal provinces? Now what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what further do you request? It will be fulfilled." Esther replied, "If it pleases the king, may the Jews in Susa also have tomorrow to carry out today's edict, and may the bodies of Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows." So the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they hanged the 10 sons of Haman. On the 14th day of the month of Adar, the Jews in Susa came together again and put to death 300 men there, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. The rest of the Jews in the royal provinces also assembled to defend themselves and rid themselves of their enemies. They killed 75,000 who hated them, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. This was done on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested, making it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th days of the month, so they rested on the 15th day, making it a day of feasting and joy. This is why the rural Jews who live in the villages observe the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting. It is a holiday for sending gifts to one another. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews in all the provinces of King Xerxes, both far and near, to establish among them an annual celebration on the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the days on which the Jews gained rest from their enemies, and the month in which their sorrow turned to joy and their mourning into a holiday. He wrote that these were to be days of feasting and joy, of sending gifts to one another and to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the custom they had started, as Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast the pur, that is, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when it came before the king, he commanded by letter that the wicked scheme which Haman had devised against the Jews should come back upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore these days are called Purim, from the word pur, because of all the instructions in this letter, and because of all they had seen and experienced. The Jews bound themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants, and all who join them, should not fail to celebrate these 2 days at the appointed time each and every year, according to their regulation. These days should be remembered and celebrated by every generation, family, province, and city, so that these days of Purim should not fail to be observed among the Jews, nor should the memory of them fade from their descendants. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim. And Mordecai sent letters with words of peace and truth to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Xerxes, in order to confirm these days of Purim at their appointed time, just as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had established them and had committed themselves and their descendants to the times of fasting and lamentation. So Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, which were written into the record. Esther chapter 10. Now King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the land, even to its farthest shores. And all of Mordecai's powerful and magnificent accomplishments, together with the full account of the greatness to which the king had raised him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews and highly favored by his many kinsmen, seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all his countrymen. Now unto the Psalms, Psalm 12. Help me, O Lord, for the godly are no more. The faithful have vanished from among men. They lie to one another. They speak with flattering lips and a double heart. May the Lord cut off all flattering lips and every boastful tongue. They say, with our tongues we will prevail. We own our lips. Who can be our master? For the cause of the oppressed and for the groaning of the needy, I will now arise, says the Lord. I will bring safety to him who yearns. The words of the Lord are flawless, like silver refined in a furnace, like gold purified sevenfold. You, O Lord, will keep us. You will forever guard us from this generation. The wicked wander freely, and vileness is exalted among men. Psalm 14. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, their acts are vile. There is no one who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven upon the sons of men to see if any understand, if any seek God. All have turned away. They have together become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Will the workers of iniquity never learn? They devour my people like bread. They refuse to call upon the Lord. There they are, overwhelmed with dread, for God is in the company of the righteous. You sinners frustrate the plans of the oppressed, yet the Lord is their shelter. Oh, that the salvation of Israel would come from Zion. When the Lord restores his captive people, let Jacob rejoice, let Israel be glad. Psalm 15. O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell in your holy mountain? He who walks with integrity and practices righteousness, who speaks the truth from his heart, who has no slander on his tongue, who does no harm to his neighbor, who casts no scorn on his friend, who despises the vile but honors those who fear the Lord, who does not revise a costly oath, who lends his money without interest and refuses a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things will never be shaken. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It was a good portion today, and I'm remembering in high school we had some Jewish students that I was friends with, and I had read Esther for the first time, and I had read the chapters we read today about how the Jews turned back this curse on those who would have killed them, and that they killed those who would have killed them. And this Jewish friend of mine was very surprised to learn that. She apparently had not read the later chapters of Esther. and the source of Purim. So if you didn't know, now you know. And there is probably a message in there for those who would align against God's chosen people. So that'll be the end for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Blessings.